So my question becomes this: since we've already established that, I mean, essentially, something's gonna have to eventually take responsibility for all the happenings that have occurred in mankind in a vast way. You know, is that why we've created big as entities? So they'll be the one that takes the downfall. Is that why Rome has fallen and all these past cultures have fallen? Because I mean, do we just like set them all up just to fall? You know, I'm kind of wondering. So I'm gonna try something new. I was thinking of telling you guys a quick version, a summary of my life story, but I'm gonna do two different versions. I'm gonna do the one that I myself lived, the one I carried and thought, the one I believed, and the one that I was recently brainwashed into realizing, seeing, and being able to witness, even though I'm this far away from it. You know? So the way I look at it is like this. Came with an immigrant family. All right, immigrant family started trying to establish itself, its family's boundaries. Came mostly women, not so many men. So you can imagine the direction that establishing themselves went. As women attempting to build families and homes. Encountering not necessarily those who knew life like them, so didn't necessarily have the same pursuit as them. Where they were looking to create families and establishments to build up homes and the well-beings. Well. um, Essentially in this aspect, there's the criteria there that, well, we all can juggle. We say we've juggled and we've seen juggling as well. So from there, you imagine criteria goes on. At some point, progress has to be made. A job is established. Relationships are established. People look to find benefits in each other, benefiting from each other, mutually benefiting to each other, and at times not even really benefiting, just making sure that they are willing to be advantageous to each other. And so this is the upbringing of life. This is how I essentially would perceive the upbringing. So if this is the environment I was growing up in, as a kid, I got to analyze my environment, right? Seeing mom understanding the value of herself, the value that was placed on her body, on her mind, on her being, and seeing that expressed through people. So that's one aspect of it, right? Noticing that that's obviously one perspective of what gets rubbed off on us, is essentially being one that comes from a home that builds survivors, because that's essentially where she's coming from, is a place where it's survive. um and showing up to a place where, well, the variation would be distinguished different. So from survive, now it's more adapting a new set of DNA with new information, that is collecting from the environment. So that environment is imprinting something on my DNA. So here I am, I'm noticing these little things. Right, here's a mom, and here's a dad, or here's a male, or here's a female, or here's this one way of doing it versus this other way of doing it, and this how it came together, this how it worked together, this is what the benefits were. A lot of us can recall this kind of stuff, going to places, being left alone while moms, went about to do her own thing. And so, times where we entertained ourselves, we didn't realize mentally probably that we were that smart and that we cataloged and, processed that much information. We just thought mom went over there and kept it simple. And over there is those people as well. And whatever's going on over there is over there. So, but we're not dumb. As kids, we already know. So from there, you go through the process of establishing that the parent attempting to establish a home and a place to upbring the children, is just struggling. She encounters a friends that invite her to do this thing, that thing. Eventually, she doesn't realize that the time she's been investing with these people, creating connections and establishing families, or people that she could turn to and treat like family, is also having a negative effect on her. She's being conditioned. Ironically, in probably no irony in it, but the aspect of it is that she's there, going to find relief. She finds relief, doesn't realize that she gets addicted to this relief. Not just the relief of not having to be alone, but relief of having a place for her children to be able to be at peace and relax and play. And, a place also where it's providing her probably food, drink, so other impulses that are being met, other needs that are being met. So, here you notice she starts getting warming up to these people. Now, these people probably found them in a good time and a good place in their life. But as we know, life isn't like that usually. It progresses and presents you challenges. And in these challenges, you look to see what people are going to be advantageous for you, what people will be benefits to you, what people will mind you only looking for your benefit to immediately solve your problem and not really regarding their well-being or what they may or may not find in it to benefit or not benefit from. But essentially, that becomes a bit of the context behind upbringing, right? So you noticing all that at some point, obviously moms doesn't realize the impulsiveness to her conditioning, how her conditioning is taking over, and now she is resorting to mental behavior, body behavior that has her stuck in these patterns of habitual lifestyles. So thus it leads to the removal or her confessing or reaching out for help in the only way she knew, which was in a very traumatizing way. So essentially, she had a lot of bent up anger and stuff in her throughout her experience of bringing us up. She must have been tolerating a lot of people, showing her that they were just going to get their benefit and they didn't care whether it was her benefit or not. And, most people, we've seen, cases like this, so it's very understandable. Now, in that case, obviously it boils up, blows up, turns into something that gets her children taken away. And now her children are introduced into a new system, a system where, the variations now are more systematic, are more now, essentially what I know in my mind, I can actually use, not versus I'm here at a home watching people and I know what they're doing, I know where they're going, but I can't say or know anything about it, or I shouldn't. So I have a change of life. Internally, something happens. Internally, I can't even tell what has happened, but something has happened to me as a child. I've gone from one who sees and doesn't say to all of a sudden I'm in a place where I know just as much as everybody knows. They all know it, and they're just simply looking to see in what way I'll use it. So for the most part, we stick to our old mentality, as children, being one that's looking for guidance, looking for someone to tell us how to do it, when to do it, why to do it, if we can even do it, and so it has a variation there that has to take process in the background, so being introduced to now this new lifestyle, now there's needs being met. Now I can count on having a hot meal 3 times a day. I can count on having a hot shower. I can count on people having to be also tuned into this aspect because they are given this as a responsibility, as a priority, as an obligation, so I know that there's also weight on top of these needs being met on top of others, so that same weight reflected and showed to me, because then, in that same sense, responsibility and priorities and obligations bring you a certain satisfaction. Now, that somebody knows this because when they make it a point to point out to you, yeah, you're here satisfied, but your whole point is to also realize that you shouldn't be, because you're not with your mom, because you're not with your siblings, because you don't know where they are or what's going on with your guys' situation or where it's even headed. You only have speculations, and all those speculations are all based on things that have been set as criteria to make it an iffy road along the way. So mom, the whole time along the way, has very easy capacity of looking like a failure in not only the court's eyes, but the children's eyes, because all they have to say is, oh, you went to the meeting, and you did all the classes, and you got your certificate, and that simple but makes you having done all of it almost irrelevant. And I've watched it, I experienced it, I've seen it, at least I saw the you did something and it doesn't really amount to something, at least as the way you thought about it, or other people didn't treat it as much, so you start seeing like these little things that are still being played, in the inner circles of people's experiences, without even having to be in the experience, because just by, being able to step out of your own shoes and put yourself in other shoes, you can see that far ahead, and essentially that's what the system brings you, is put yourself in everybody's shoes, know that you can do everybody's job, and know that everybody can be replaced, so essentially you're useful is what they're telling you, so, and they don't tell you always in a way where it keeps it being like you feel good about it, right? All you're probably thinking right now is, did he not realize he said he could still lose that? Or some aspect of that, and in concept, it's just what they call theory, but in a mind that can manifest, what does a theory become? If I pick up a theory and I sit here and I dwell on it and dwell on it and dwell on it and dwell on it, and then I add feeling to it and emotion, they told me that I can manifest. So what does that happen? What happens then? What should I think of happening then? Because essentially it's how you guys have like been living with me these last couple years, is constantly conditioning not just the train patterns, the direction that they take, but also the amount of information collected, or if it even leaves any emotional residue or mental residue, because essentially that's kind of the point, So from there, I got into the system, started living that life, bouncing from home to home, staying only so long, only having so long to make friends or be with friends, knowing always that an end is always ahead, because it seemed to be that change was the constant variable. So change became the normal. So where others felt uncomfortable, there was then more comfort, So, and essentially I could deliver also a little extra dose of comfort, because I'd be able to relay, I'm not really comfortable. I'm gonna tell you just the train, the process, and the procedure that I utilize to access this aspect of myself that you're calling peace, So, or comfort, or however it is that you guys might address it, So, and in that sense, you start learning the systematic approach of things, expectations, plans, goals. So being in the system, you start thinking, well, I mean, essentially plans, goals, everything, like the whole time you're there planning, and the foster care system taught me well how to plan, but it also taught me that I wanted those plans to eventually end. I didn't want to plan anymore, Eventually, they kind of made you think that there would be a time when you'd make it home and life would go back to normal. Like if there was something to arrive at it and be able to say, oh, this is how it should be. And so, and in that process, you go through this planning, all this time you're in foster care, planning, you just want the planning to end, and especially because they go as far as planning your whole life for you almost, I mean, they show you how it's done. This is how you plan for your future. This is how you plan for your work life. This is how you plan for your family life. This is how you keep your private life. And then this is what it becomes, a reputation that people can view. People can say to you, hey, in your private time, you do this. Hey, in your dedicated time, you do this. Hey, in your work life, you do this. So it becomes something that can be openly addressed, discussed, spoken with. At least it should be, in terms of those who it would only need to regard or be in regard to, So from there, eventually the process of all that, developed some parts of me, becoming a teenager, learning all those aspects of the self, knowing habits, school, homework, studying, setting a time for one to go have recreational time, ride the bike, play some ball, So and all these aspects, you understand this part of yourself, and the whole time you're doing it, but you're doing it like you shouldn't be there, It's like they should never tell you that you aren't home when you go into foster care, because it really fucks with the kid's head, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I've really actually known any actual home besides myself, That's probably as close as I can get to a home, So with that being said, as they tell you and they give you all this, this perspective of this return to a home, so essentially, I learned it was more the walking throughs of building a home. So when I exited the environment of the system, you would think it'd go like immediately to, all right, now I know how to build a home, establish a home, and work on it, or now I know how to build a future, well, establish a future and work on it, or now I know how to set goals and arrive to something, now set goals and arrive to something. And essentially, I mean, that's the aspect of life, that we should be, taking the course of and navigating through it in certain perspective of and management of concepts in. But essentially, where this kind of leads me back to is, so from understanding all that, and knowing that I never actually arrived at developing me, I never arrived at actually seeing me, I never actually arrived at focusing on actual things, like it was always some thought of foster care, home, going back home, school, not being home, knowing that there's already this many years and this many years already that I'm without knowing what home or this concept of home that is addressed in that word, So in that sense, you don't really realize it, but you have all these adults things, all these functions, all these processes that function in you already, like as adults, usually are told that they have to develop it. In my sense, I felt like it was already developed. It was already awakened. It was already aware due to me having to pick up, putting myself in the shoes of my parent and having to look at life from where she was drawn life to be perceivable from, and drawn to whatever concept of what it is or isn't, and the variations, because I mean, literally, she used to call me on my foster calls, and like I would have conversations with her where the conversation would be like the moments I have right here with you guys. I'd be there talking to her. Hey mom, so how was your day? Oh, well, my day was good. See, I went to the store, and then at the store, oh man, this is that, and this is that, and this is that, and all those fucking and I mean, I shouldn't be so verbal with it, but vulgar. I mean, essentially, it was just more of an expression of like, her heart would talk to me while her mouth was running, and her mouth would just be telling me about all the ideas, but her heart would be saying other things, basically just showing me all how she's been hurt. And she hasn't had no way of being able to, deal with it, or of even recognizing it. She didn't even understand what the hurt was, So, like, she'd be having entire conversations with me where I'd be, like, getting insight as a therapist, as a psychologist, as somebody that is professional. And I would sit there and I would listen to her as a professional. I would ask myself my professional opinion, and without judging, but always feeling that, like, dang, there you go again. There's that wave of uncomfort again. There's that wave of familiarity that we'd rather not be so familiar with. But it's been like that long, since that long, for that long. So it's almost like saying, you think that I didn't have a phase without you guys, and you guys are probably right. But I gave myself credit of not having had you guys there throughout that experience. But we all know essentially the truth of the matter, so like I said, I mean, we're all here in each other's presence. We're all here in the same plane of existence, so that's where I was getting to with that, was knowing that we're all here existing, our only power that seems to be that humans have over another person without even knowing or knowingly is walking up to that person and being consciously present with the awareness to the degree and level and in the direction that you yourself would then essentially find yourself recognizing not just your version but the other person's version as well. So but yeah, so in that case, well, let's get back to the story. So from the upbringing, went through those phases, arrived at a point where I noticed that, I think at some point in that adventure in the foster system, it was a point where I measured the level of intelligence, I looked at the level of intelligence and the way that people utilize their intelligence, and I noticed that some people had the capacity to how do I put this, to not just recognize themselves, but recognize more and then play small, and I seen it constantly, like everywhere I looked, all these people look smart. They all look like they have potential. They all look like they have a good story to tell. They all look like their stories are just etched all across their souls, and yet I meet the people and I talk to them, and guess what, I could either have something good to say or something bad to say, I mean, sometimes it's probably better not to have anything to say at all, so the way I look at it is in these aspects, I mean, all these people, I'm supposed to think of them as having been good because they thought they were saving me by not giving me something to shoulder, good because they thought that maybe their point of view I shouldn't be shouldering, good because they thought that maybe they already understood where I was looking from and that it was probably better that I stood where I was at looking from where I was looking from, so and all these aspects, yet still approaching me, still talking to me, still attempting to build some type of delusion or illusion in the form of connection, because again, one soul to another soul, I mean, I could hear the soul crying to me, I could hear the heart crying to me, but the person, the words, their demeanor, their attitude, their management of themselves, it would give you that impression of, yeah, I have a heart and what, and so essentially, I mean, I must say that this is probably the version that most people see of me now, because this is the one that stood out the most to me in my upbringing. It's like everywhere I went, everywhere I look, everyone has an answer. Yet they'd rather be a part of everything else that we're managing rather than the perspective that is with that word drawn or interpreted as being the theory behind it. And then knowing that I have body, one part of myself, the part that I watch and observe like you guys do when I play back these videos, the part that you guys, are giving credit for when I'm looking everywhere else for not looking at the camera, or my tone of voice. I think I was scared. Toyo! Nah. Or, it doesn't even have to make sense with you guys. That's the best part, That's when you're free. When you feel uncomfortable and like you didn't even make sense. Oh, thank God. Freedom. 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 Felt so good. Hopefully none of you guys had to trip up over anybody calling it a lie or telling you you're being too creative in a lazy way. Calling it a lie. Well, hey, thanks for you guys' time. I'm pretty sure there's more to this video that I gotta make, so I'm gonna take a break. So from there, the upbringing, right? So I pretty much went through this phase where I realized, that my level of intelligence, the level of the things I knew and the way I could do things were basically all the same. I seen all these people were smart, they all had intelligence, but they all still showed one thing, is that it wasn't about how smart you looked, how good you talked, or how well you dressed, or, all those things had an effect, right? Had something to do, but it was more about, I suppose, learning that you have to wear a mask and being okay with it. And that's basically saying, so you're telling me that I can be an engineer. Okay, I'm an engineer. Now time to go grab a mask. Now I'm a student engineer. Now I'm going to sit here and play with the idea and beliefs in myself. If I'm the one taking the credit, and I'm going to sit there and measure where it is that I find that it's okay to be an engineer versus probably too overqualified, or, however it is that I might provide a variation. But essentially, that's the whole perspective of life. Like I just told you can be an engineer, and you know it. That's all there's to it. Now, with everyone else, they're the ones who you go and talk to about being an engineer, Oh, what can you do about being an engineer? How can you be an engineer? And they're the ones that'll be like, oh man, they work long hours. Oh man, their pay is great. You're going to have big ass houses and big old cars. And oh man, you're going to have to be flying from this place to that place, going here and doing there and this and that, and essentially that's the lifestyle, So I'm here right now knowing this part of myself and apparently trying to prove something to somebody, though I might not know it. Essentially, I know it's through the conditioning that there must be these secret conversations in my happenings and doings that are happening and being done in other spaces and spheres that essentially are just, for whoever it is that has access to it, be entertained. So, essentially now is essential. So, but the conditioning, the having to stop your life, slow your life down so much so that you can catch any little movement outside of your own will, awareness, or conscience. And that's what life has become for me. Before this it was for whatever reason or another. The opposite of that would be so still that I noticed everything, from the little lint flying around in the air around me, to the little black things in my eyes that are floating around the air through my pupils or my eyeball. That's a very, very small and tiny. Now there's the rest of the world out, So, those are just two variations, Hey, well, thanks for you guys' time. I'm going to finish this video up. I just got to watch it and see where I left off because, as you can see, I still got this bit of myself that I have to juggle and get through better managing of, So I'll get back to this. Thanks for you guys' time. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that insight into some of these experiences that I've been able to capture in my own life.